I'm Adrienne Bankert, and you're watching One Nation Under God, where we will not consider faith too controversial or taboo.
I have every right to stand in my pulpit and talk about what's biblical and talk to people about what we should be standing for and what we should be believing for.
We are facing some serious issues. We're facing serious issues in Washington, D.C. We, as a church.
Welcome. If you're new here, I want to share a little bit about why a cable news network, NewsNation, has launched a series on faith. And this is very important to discuss because so many times faith has been considered too controversial to discuss in mainstream news. And yet faith informs everything we do, and I mean we. There are so many of us who have faith. It's just what it is or who it is that we have faith in that differentiates us. Faith in God happens to be something that more than 80% of the world and the United States has in common. And so that faith informs what we believe. It also informs how we vote on crucial issues. And Gallup polls show that the vast majority of Americans say they believe in God. 60 to 70% or more consider themselves Christians. It is high time that we decided to address the value system that so many people hold near and dear to their hearts and stop treating it as taboo, when it is essentially the biggest, most significant kitchen table issue in our lives today. I'm Adrienne Bankert. You're watching One Nation Under God, NewsNation's brand new series where we share stories that bring perspective around people, communities, and stories of faith. This week in particular, it's a major one. As many as 2.6 billion people all around the world have Holy Week in mind. These are the days leading up to Easter, or Resurrection Sunday, as it's called in so many communities, marking what Christians believe happened nearly 2,000 years ago: the death, the crucifixion, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. For those flocking to the Vatican on Palm Sunday, Pope Francis did not appear. He did not deliver his homily. There was no sermon. The pontiff has been ill. His health battles a major concern for the past few years. In Jerusalem, at the Mount of Olives, a procession of cheering crowds there, as well as at the Holy Sepulchre, revered as the site of Christ's death, with a backdrop of war as the fighting between Israel and Gaza continues. And you cannot ignore that this is one of the biggest political issues that any of us has seen in our lifetime. America's response to October 7th and the relationship the United States has with one of its greatest allies is making its way into sermons all across this nation. More and more pastors, they're standing up, not to endorse a particular candidate or exactly say who's right and who's wrong, but they want to know what the Bible says, and they are sharing that with their congregations in regards to foreign policy, regarding the Jewish people, as well as speaking out about changes in the government, the border crisis, and what children are taught in schools. I spoke with the CEO and pastor of Eagle Mountain International Church in Fort Worth, Texas, Pastor George and Terri Pearsons. They never do interviews, but they did decide to speak with me, candidly, about where the country and the church are today. There is this new openness to speak out about what the church believes is right and wrong for the nation and what has changed. Here's what they told me.
Is there a shift in America?
They call it an awakening. There's an awakening to God. What does it mean? What does an awakening mean? It means wake up. Wake up that one day there's somebody that doesn't believe in God, doesn't believe the things of God, doesn't believe the Bible at all, and all of a sudden they wake up and they go, oh. There is a God. Oh, there is a Jesus. And we've seen that over and over and over again. And I believe that we're in a time right now in this nation where we're experiencing an awakening to God, an awakening like we've never seen one before, because we need an awakening in the midst of all of the darkness that's going on, in the midst of all of the things that are taking place right now. There is no hope. People don't have hope unless they have the Bible, unless they have Jesus in their hearts. And then you look at life from a completely different perspective. We're in a place right now where we've got pastors are waking up. We're waking up. Do we know everything? No. But are we getting to know God and His place in us? Yes.
You know, there are a lot of people who are feeling more of a responsibility to speak out and say what they believe. And there are some people who are really upset and really believing that their vote is going to potentially change the direction of policy and the direction of government in this country. We saw in various states people standing up, even those in leadership, making their faith known, from Governor Youngkin in Virginia to Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida. And education and a knowledge of history is something that's become highly contentious and is very important to those I've spoken to who were raised in the Christian church and the Catholic Church. And there is a strong stance about not denying the Founding Fathers' own faith beliefs when they wrote the Declaration and the Constitution.
The United States, in fact, is not only founded on the Bible. People have no idea how much the Constitution reeks of Scripture.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
our form of government and all of the concepts that we have in our the American structure of our civil liberties, all of that is all an outgrowth of the Bible, and the people who wrote those words were of the Bible. And it's very dangerous to make assumptions on what some are taught, even in schools, that are inaccuracy.
So what about Israel? As far as the nation is concerned, there have been multiple reports, and you've seen it in news headlines everywhere on social media, how much churches and ministries have been traveling as volunteers and making donations and supporting Israeli security, funding rebuilding efforts for those survivors of the October 7th attacks. But the relationship between the Christian church and Israel is one that has been evolving over the years. For many, it's been building over the years. It's been blossoming, including from Eagle Mountain International Church. In fact, they say that what prepared them for October 7th was that they were already making very vital friendships with groups and individuals in Israel. Watch.
And I know that God is moving on us to be a support to Israel. Our support for Israel goes way back. I mean, for me personally, it goes way back when I first accepted Jesus as my Lord, and I started reading the Bible. There it is. There's Israel right there. And then we started going to Israel, and that began how many years ago? That was
2001.
2001. And going there, and there's something about when you go to Israel, you can feel it. You can sense the presence of God in that place. And I can remember the first time I went there, and we got off the plane, and it was actually standing on the ground coming down the stairs from the plane. And the moment you stood on that ground, you could sense something is different. There is a presence of God in this place. And so that began to grow and develop in us. And then we made friends. We would come over and we'd make friends with this one and this one, and then go back and develop these relationships and get to know one another. And I really think what was happening was the Lord was preparing us all this time for October the 7th. We had connected with people in Israel. We've been helping with various charities, supporting them. And at first, some of them were like this, we don't know, we question your motives about this. But once they get to know you, and once they get to know that you don't have any motive other than we love you, we support you, we are here for you, you are not alone, and they begin to trust you, well, we've done that. And over the years, when October the 7th hit, we were poised and ready to connect with the people that we already had contact with. And we were able to step in and begin to help them. And that passion, you can hear it in my voice. It's a passion that a pastor has for the state of Israel.
And there are, of course, a lot of different opinions about what happened on October 7th and what needs to happen next. Many people crying out for peace, and at the same time divided as to how that peace will come about. and all of the world tragedies, when you compare what happened between Israel and the Palestinians and Hamas particularly, and then you have what happened in Ukraine and with Russia. We've seen different ministries respond to war zones. And this particular church, Eagle Mountain International, has, together with other churches, funded many Ukrainian Jews relocating to Israel after the start of the war in Ukraine.
George and Terri Pearsons is one of the major agencies in Israel. They work very closely with the Prime Minister's office and go all the way back before the foundation of the State of Israel. And one of their main focuses is Aliyah and the Jewish communities around the world. So they know where they are, who they are. And when the war in Ukraine broke out, there were so many of them that felt very threatened because there was a lot of focus on the Jewish community as well as just being in a war zone. And so we had known that trouble was coming. We sensed it in our heart, had money we had set aside. We reached out to Karen Hayesod and said, we want to be a part of this aliyah, which is a Hebrew word which means to come higher, to go higher. And so we began to support and fund, and our congregation and even other congregations joined us in sending literally millions of dollars to help get Ukrainian Jews out, as well as other areas and other nations in the general Eastern Europe bloc wanting to get out and get to Israel. So we helped to sponsor not only the flights, but support them for their first year of transition upon coming there. It's another language, another culture. And so the fruit of that has been very profound. And we've also done that in bringing Aliyah to Jews in other countries as well, people that cannot afford it for themselves, but they want to go home. God's put it in the heart of every Jew to go home.
And to see the people coming on those planes, leaving those countries, and knowing that they're going back home, which is a biblical promise. That is a desire for God to bring his people back home to the land that actually belongs to them, and to see their faces, and they come off the planes and they are there, they're home. They know they're home. Some have bent and kissed the ground, knowing that the Lord has brought them back. And to see them and to see their faces and to hear their stories about how they acclimate into this new place, it really is quite stunning to see and for them to experience. And what we're basically doing is we're help funding in Exodus.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's a modern day Exodus.
It's a modern day Exodus.
Not everyone agrees. Not everyone in the church agrees that pastors should be so vocal. I did ask for the Pearsons to respond to those who might wonder or who might say that the church maybe shouldn't be involved in global affairs. Here's their response.
Well, first of all, I would say you look at the Bible itself, and there's so many of the prophets and so many of those who were the religious people that were directly involved in the decisions that were being made, things that were taking place. And people talk about, Pastor, you really shouldn't talk about politics. But the things that are involved in politics touch the things that are involved in the Bible. I'm not being political, I'm being biblical. And when I address things about abortion, when I address things about the various issues that we face, all of those things are biblical, and I have every right to stand in my pulpit and talk about what's biblical and talk to people about what we should be standing for and what we should be believing for.
I suggest that people read, if you don't want to read much of the Bible, just read the table of contents. Just read that and you'll find how much of it is actually named kings, and how many of the books were actually written by political figures, to political figures, about political figures, political wars that were fought. Judges. So Israel, it's interesting that you mentioned Exodus and the comparison to what's happening now. God said that he would make the return to Israel bigger than the Exodus when they left the first time. He said, this will be a greater sign to all the world that I am your God, and that I do what I say I will do when they see how I am bringing you home. And that's only just begun. They are a miracle nation. In only 75 years, what they have done, some nations haven't been able to accomplish in thousands of years. So the hand of God is on them. Abraham Lincoln said, someone said to him, "Oh, I believe God is on our side." And he said, "Sir, I am not so concerned as to whether or not God is on our side, but as to whether or not we are on his."
Speaking of some of our founding fathers, what some people have to say about Thomas Jefferson's note regarding the separation of church and state is another hot button issue. Here's what the Pearsons shared about that.
There is no statement of the separation of church and state in the Constitution. The fact that the government does not mandate religion or control the religion, there's a wall that is set between them.
To keep government
out
of the church, not to keep the church out of the government.
We're coming back to the place where they did back in the early years of the American Revolution, where the politicians would go to church to hear what the pastors were saying, to be able to make the decisions they had to make. And I believe that we are actually seeing an awakening and a revival in Congress, in the Senate, in Washington, D.C., and it's getting stronger and stronger and stronger every day.
Whether in or out of the pulpit, and with so much immense change, we really all need more perspective. We need more understanding. We need more empathy. And the hope is that with all of these stories, that we gain a fresh new vantage point, so that whether or not we agree, that's not the key issue. The issue is, can we understand why someone believes the way they do? Can we gain a little bit better depth when it comes to conversations, rather than angrily debating back and forth? That's my hope here on One Nation Under God. And I'm so grateful that you'll be able to see the stories on YouTube every week, as well as our programming on air and television. Maybe we can shed a little more light as to why people believe what they do and why they vote the way they do. I hope you enjoyed this episode of One Nation Under God. You can look again every Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, for new episodes, and we will have more for you across our network and shows. Thank you so much. Make sure to comment kindly, keyword kindly, if you are going to say anything in response to our stories. I'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to subscribe right here. And if you're celebrating Easter, have a peaceful and blessed one. If you're not, our best to you as well. I know all of us could use some of that peace and calm and quiet. Until next time, I'm Adrienne Bankert for NewsNation.